Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our community conversation around wrongful convictions. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Tracy Brain, and I'm the current director of the WMU Cooley Innocence Project. And again, I am thankful to you all for coming to join us this evening to talk about this important topic. So as you may know, October 2nd is Wrongful Conviction Day. And it's a day that we in the innocence community take some time to raise awareness about the impact of wrongful convictions on individuals, families, and communities. Our wrongfully incarcerated brothers and sisters are often taken away from their homes and their community for years, decades even. And again, those of us in the innocence community have dedicated our professional lives, right, and to a large extent our personal lives, into addressing, right, this very important issue. So we wanted to take some time today to discuss the causes and remedies concerning wrongful convictions and to introduce you to two have some experience in this area. So let me first tell you a little bit about the history of our clinic. We were founded in 2001. So we're in the midst of planning a 20th anniversary recognition of all the hard work that our current and past staff has done over the years. And we were founded as a result of a statute passed by the Michigan legislature that allowed for DNA testing, right, in older cases. As DNA technology improved over the years, there were a lot of people who were in prison that could benefit from testing, right, renewed testing, a renewed review of their cases in light of advances in DNA technology. So our clinic was founded on those principles. And again, we've been doing that for 20 years. For years, we filed petitions on behalf of our clients in courts, seeking relief in courts to, again, get materials tested in cases and potentially get new trials and work, for the release of our clients. Most recently, however, we forged two partnerships with the Wayne County Conviction Integrity Unit and with the state of Michigan's Conviction Integrity Unit. The Attorney General, Dana Nessle's office, also has a Conviction Integrity Unit where we're now working side by side with the prosecutor, right, which has made our jobs in many ways much easier. And we are very grateful, right, for the recognition on behalf of the prosecutor's office and the government that these issues are important, that these mistakes do happen, and that they're, again, devastating to our clients and their families. So we're now working alongside Valerie Newman and Robin Frankel and Dana Nessel to achieve relief in our clients' cases. Those partnerships are the result of the hard work of our immediate past director, Marla Mitchell-Sisson, who was with us today and who was going to lead us in a discussion with two of our exonerees. So today we have with us Lacino Hamilton, who was exonerated in September of 2020. And with us remotely, we have Kenneth Nixon, who was exonerated in February of 2021. So as Marla will talk about, the theme of this year's Wrongful Conviction Day is the fight continues. And as you'll hear from our guests, the fight indeed continues, and they are very much in the throes of it. Both of our guests, like so many other exonerees around the country and their allies, are working every day to make sure that the people who are still incarcerated, who are still suffering, are able to get relief as well. And I see that we also have remotely Mr. Gilbert Poole, who is our most recent exoneree. Hi, Gil. So glad to have you today. So at this point, I'm going to turn things over to Marla Mitchell-Sisson, our immediate past director, and again, the woman who has shepherded us through these last 20 years and made such an impact on our clients and community.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us and spending time learning more about these really important issues. I know that you're not here to hear from me, so I'm going to get right into it in talking with Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Nixon about some of their perspectives related to both the causes and remedies, as Tracy said. And I'll just start off, Lacino. We obviously only have an hour, so we can't hear either one of your full stories, but on this theme of causes, I wonder if you could briefly share a piece of your story and talk about the handful of things, because I know it was more than one thing, that led to your wrongful conviction.
I was arrested in 1994 for a crime unrelated to the crime I ultimately spent 26 years in prison for. I was sent down to the police station for questioning and literally woke up with a murder. A jailhouse. I ain't even calling them jailhouse informants, right? I think the jailhouse informant gives a misrepresentation of what happened in my particular case. These men were not jailhouse informants, they were jailhouse liars. And it's a difference. The police had created a scheme where they had information to every crime that they investigate crimes. They fed information to a handful of men, and they testified to those things in court as if they were confessions.
So basically false stories about individuals who were accused with crimes.
Yes, ma'am.
Other factors that contributed to your wrongful conviction that you want to mention to the audience?
I mean, I could sit here and I could detail the individual things in my case, but ultimately, when I sat back and I thought about everything, you know, the case in general, right? The particular facts I believe are not as important as we have a system, we live in America and we base everything about competition, right? We have this competitive society and supposedly the competition to push forward what's best. I think something that most people don't take into consideration is that in any arena where there's competitiveness, there's cheating. You cannot have competition without having cheating. They just go hand in hand. You know, so having that said, it may be okay if you think that, well, somebody cheating jacks or cheating sports or cheating cars or cheating racing. There's nothing in life where there's competition where cheating isn't involved. And our competitive justice system is the same. I think it more boils down to, like I said, we can sit there and we can go over the individual things that police officers manufactured this or manufactured that. But at the end of the day, police officers are placed under pressure to solve crimes. Judges are placed under pressure to punish people who have convicted of crime. And all of this is done in this competitive arena. And in this competitive arena, people are going to look for advantages. So even in the sense where the officers may have wanted to, close a case, right? I thought about just the way it's structured in general. The entire work product is the police work product. I mean, that's an advantage. You know, I sit back and think about how a witness came forward sometime later. He wasn't a police witness. The police go, they knock on what doors they want to knock on, they talk to who they want to talk to. They often include what they want to include. And the honest to God truth is we don't know if they included everything or not. Because this competitive system has placed advantages for the officers. The complete work product is theirs. I sat back over time and I looked at some of those statements that were taken in my case, and I realized these statements were manufactured. I knew that the person making the statement did not know me. I just knew it. You know, it's impossible. But as I sat back and I looked at those statements over time, I realized a police could write in a statement what they want to write in the statement. You know, so I just sit back, I think about our court-appointed system, how everyone knows that court-appointed attorneys generally do not have the resources that they need to adequately defend a defendant. That's cheating. You done created a system where you know they don't have the resources that they need, which puts them at a disadvantage. That's what cheating is really about. Cheating is looking for an unfair advantage, where the state has unlimited resources and the court-appointed attorney has a limited amount of resources. It's structured that way. It's cheating. You didn't create a system where one person has an advantage over another. So, I mean, so it's good, I think, to detail the individual or the unique things that happen in the case so that we can be aware of things. But ultimately, wrongful convictions will continue as long as the primary goal is winning and losing. Is putting some in the win column and putting some in the lose column, as opposed to our ultimate goal is how do we repair what happened? How do we, if there's a harm or a loss, how do we deal with that? And as long as our criminal justice system isn't based upon that, we're going to continue to have wrongful convictions, in my opinion.
Wow, thank you, Lacino. Ken, if I could kind of pose the same question to you, to talk a little bit about your case and the contributing factors that came into play.
I was wrongfully convicted. I spent 15 years and 9 months in prison for 2 counts of felony murder, 4 counts of attempted murder, all of which I had no idea had taken place. The crime was committed with a weapon that I didn't even understand how to possess. It was a Molotov cocktail that started a house fire where 2 children perished in a house fire. I had no idea what a Molotov cocktail was. My trial attorney spent well over 45 minutes trying to explain to me what a Molotov cocktail was. Lo and behold, we later discovered that the police had tons of information that was never turned over, and some information that was turned over that was ignored by the prosecutor. The basics of it is, I echo exactly what Lacino said. They were cheating. When there was a point in my case where a jailhouse warrant was introduced, and at that point, I knew I was going to prison. I knew I was going to prison because I understood that they were willing to do anything to get a conviction. If you have this person that is saying that I told him something that is impossible, it's absolutely impossible to be true. And, I knew I was going to prison the moment. We later discovered that, a lot of information, perfect example of just have police reports that says multiple cars were dispatched to for crowd control, but yet we don't have a single name, not a picture, address, a phone number of nobody that was at that scene, not a single person. So, you add in the fact that multiple detectives in my case have been involved in multiple exonerations. The prosecutor in my case has been the prosecutor in multiple exonerations. There's no way you can say that this was by accident. None. The reality is it wasn't. They knew it was about winning and losing. I 100% agree with Mr. Hamilton. It was about winning and losing. There were signs from the very beginning that showed that they had the wrong person. They still chose to prosecute instead of actually trying to figure out who committed it. They pushed it through. There was tons of evidence that pointed in other directions. There were other suspects that could have been investigated. None of that happened. Absolutely none of it. My exoneration came on the heels of a multi-year investigation by multiple different innocent agents. The Conviction Integrity Unit eventually exonerated me along with Cooley Innocence Project. A lot of what happens in this system from the prosecutor and the police side goes unchecked. It's very rare that anybody has trouble. Even when we find, as we all know, there are cases where intentional official misconduct has been documented. Nothing ever happened. Wrongful convictions are a stain on our country. The justice system is absolutely built around winning and losing. It has nothing to do with truth or justice. For people in our situations, there were signs from probably the day we were arrested that said, they were going down the wrong path. But instead of actually doing their jobs, they continued down that wrong path. In some instances, it's a culture. In some instances, it's a mindset, and a lot of it because there's no accountability. So who cares if I send the wrong person to prison? Eventually, I'm going to retire with a pension and enjoy it with, it's not going to matter how many lives I destroyed on the course to get there. It's not going to matter. But, this is where we have to make change, because there's just not, we can't go on this way. We have to change something. My personal opinion is, as long as there's no accountability, it's going to keep happening. There has to be some sort of consequences when you have these situations that happen. We can prove that it's intentional. I'm a firm believer in there's a difference between a mistake and doing something intentionally. And in those instances where it's intentional, that person should suffer some form of consequence, whether it's just losing a pension or losing a job or removing their law license. But something has to happen. This going on this way, we're destroying lives. You're making more victims than we are anything else. And it's not right. It's not fair. And the only people that lose are people like us that wind up on the short end of it.
So on that topic of accountability, which was actually the theme of last year's Wrongful Conviction Day, I'd like to hear from each of you. If we know nationally that, we'll just use prosecutors as an example, right? That very few prosecutors have been held civilly liable for their actions. I don't really think we're going to get into that discussion tonight. I think that's a little too off topic, but they haven't been held directly accountable as the lawyer in the case. There have been a handful of prosecutors who have been disciplined and who have lost their law license. But I'd like to hear from each of you whether that is enough of an accountability procedure, and should we be seeing that more? Or do you have a suggestion about how to, in fact, hold folks more accountable? So, Lacino, what are your initial thoughts on that?
I want to say this, so over the years, I've been a person that, I have a lot of criticisms and critiques of things. And people initially, automatically want to know, well, what's the solution? You can sit here over and over and over again and talk about stuff, and people want to get to the solutions. And I don't know the solutions, right? I don't. I tell people this is that if a police gets dispatched to a home for whatever, it could be a car in the driveway that's on fire. But when they go to the house and they see a child that's in distress, they have in their mind, they're not leaving that house with that child in that house. They don't know where that child gonna live. They don't know where they're gonna sleep, but they know this is a condition that they cannot leave the child in. Somebody might say that with a woman or somebody elder. It could be a friend, that you have a person who may be in a relationship that you know unhealthy. People would have probably advised them to leave that immediately with the same thing in mind. Not knowing what they're going to do for food, clothes, that's irrelevant. We need to get you out of this situation. Prison is the same situation to me. There's so much literature, there's so much that has been written and documented on the harm that prison causes. So I don't have a solution, the ultimate solutions, but I feel the same way. Prison should be abolished today. We have a system that we know is an oppressive system, a totalitarian system, an authoritarian system. We understand that the chief concern of prison is to control people. It's to micromanage somebody's life down to seconds, down to minutes. You're going to do this for this amount of time. Understanding that, because I don't know the ultimate solutions, but I do know that a harm is being caused. We know a harm is being caused, and we're allowing the harm to be caused because we don't have solutions. And it seems like that only happens to prisoners or people that we somehow don't like in our society. There are situations where people would tell you they do not know, but they know that something has to happen right now. And that's how I feel about prisons. Solutions or not, ultimate solutions or not, understanding the class component. It's not even a secret that that your economic status impacts the level of justice you get. We know that race matters. We know that race impacts the level of justice you get. We know that gender impacts sexual orientation. We know that these are facts, not even to be disputed depending on where you're at. But for some reason, when it comes to prison, knowing the harm, knowing the injustice is still something. Like I said, I don't have the ultimate solutions, right? Saying this too, as far as accountability, the way that we generally look at it, in my opinion, is how do we hold police officers accountable? I think the accountability begins with that all the power shouldn't be there. I think we starting with the accountability, trying to leave things in place. We trying to leave a system in place where there's a disproportion of the power within the state, within the police courts and prisons, but somehow we're going to ask you to be on Scout's honor. That's what accountability has actually boiled down to. Accountability is not boiled down to how do we put something in place where there is not a disproportionate distribution of power. And that's the real problem. Defendants, poor people really have no power in the system. All the power is based with the state. Once again, the complete investigatorial product is the states. That's a problem, because now I have to go on good faith. I have to go on good faith that this product is what you say it is. And I don't believe we should be going on good faith knowing that we know about human behavior. We have this thing in our mind that when a person puts on the way that we know that if a person put on a particular suit or uniform or badge, then it's just about faith. Accountability to me begins when we have to deal with the way that the power system is based up to where, like I said, the prosecutor has unlimited resources and the defendant has a limited amount of resources. Or that I have to go into court with these police statements that are, like I said, are the complete product of the police. Another thing quickly, is that a lot of times when we think about the criminal justice system or any system that's not serving people as we would want it to serve them, right? Everything is done in isolation. We think that if we can tinker with this, then we can tinker with something, then it's not. So like when I tell people that I can see a world without prisons, most people have a problem with that. And as I tell them, the problem is you're not envisioning an entirely different world. You want the world to stay just the way it is, but just want to eliminate prisons. That'll never work. But if we start addressing some of the factors that we know, there's certain things that we know, like there's some kids that somebody could legitimately say that child probably going to end up in prison. And we can know that based upon certain conditions or certain factors in a person's life. So as opposed to trying to address those factors or conditions, we try to tinker with something in that individual's life. When it's bigger than most of these problems we know are bigger than individuals, right? I didn't know Ken, or I didn't know a lot of these men who have been exonerated over the last 3 years, but we all shared a lot of things in common, whether you were from Pontiac, Flint, Detroit, a lot of poor, oppressed, and that's another thing. A lot of the language that we use, we'll come to us a panel or something like this, and the word oppression will never come out. We'll never talk about capitalism. I don't see how it's possible to have any sort of social justice, anything, and the word capitalism don't come up. So a lot of times, even when we talk about accountability to me is not with Detective James Fleming. It's with that competitive. How do you hold a competitive system accountable? Because there's going to be many Detective James Flemings or all the different, all of these, some of these bad actors. It's going to be a million of them, whether it's here, Chicago, Philadelphia, wherever. So I mean, I don't have ultimate solutions. I don't even traffic in that. I don't think it's necessary to have ultimate solutions. You know, I mean, I think about how we've been on this earth however many thousands of years, and now you're asking this individual or this group to do something that maybe that we've been trying to do for the last thousands of years. You know, so and what that becomes is a non-starter. When a person asks you what the solution is, and if you don't know the ultimate solution, the conversation sort of dies right there. As opposed to realizing that we're going to have to work toward some sort of solution, and the solution is much bigger. It's even like when I think about accountability, I don't want any of the officers charged. That's not what I think about accountability when I think about holding them accountable. I want something put in place to where what happened, that we know that there's greater checks and balances, that there's less likely of an opportunity. I do believe some people, like I'm the first one to say that Prosecutor Kim Worthy out of Wayne County is the person who played such a significant role in my release. And as I tell Ken and them, I say we all should be asking that Kim Worthy should be fired. And a lot of people have a problem with this. And well, what's going to happen to the integrity unit? My problem is nothing is being done to ensure that this won't happen again. So you can let 80 guys out. But if nothing is being done, like we say, those solutions to start dealing with is disproportionate distribution of power. And I think our language needs to change. I think when we start thinking about oppression, we think about the problems different. When we think maybe it's capitalism or distribution of, or some sort of distribution of power, we start thinking of things different. Right now, we think that the distribution of power is all right. Obviously, we do, because it doesn't come into the conversation. We think that having a capitalistic based criminal justice system is all right because we're not railing against capitalism. We should not have competition in things that matter to people most. Food, clothes, shelter, healthcare, safety. Those things should not even be up for some sort of competitive adventure. Because we already know most people, or everybody ain't strong anyway. Everybody ain't fast. So we cannot have a system that says, well, if you're not fast as this person, if you're not strong as this person. So I think that even when we talk about solutions, I think we need to start thinking about these problems totally different. I would write when I was in prison, I would write about prison and speak about it as the same way as people who had experiences through Nazi Germany. I would do that because it's such a sensitive topic in our society. Some things you're not supposed to compare to other things because they're just that. And I would and when it comes to prison, I would compare prison to that. The things that were the things that's necessary to micromanage and control someone's life, or to strip a person down to nothing. So I sit back, I'll go in a store and I'll be looking at products and I'll start crying. I cry because I'm angry. I say, man, that's fucked up. Because I'll sit back and I'll see how my options in prison weren't really even an option. They had been narrowed down to, it's what we're doing with prison. You know, it's just a total concept to me that you can throw people away and that you can, it's even like I say with Ken and them. I mean, I'm all over the place, but.
All right, well, I'm gonna ask Ken the same question, and Lacino knows how much I love to talk about language, which we may also not have time to do tonight, but you're making some really poignant points here, and really, I think, provoking our audience to think about these problems in a different way. And you are coming from a place where it's very difficult for us to counter what you're saying. And I'm not saying that meaning I want to counter you. I'm saying that's the kind of credibility that I think our clients have, because they have lived from the, maybe even before their arrest, but certainly from the time of their arrest to this day, whether they've been free 5 minutes, 5 years, 15 years, they have to live with this for the rest of their lives. And, you know, Lacino, you talking about it in the broader context of opportunities and having basic needs, as well as something, again, that we want to try to accomplish a lot, but, you know, the question that I know you guys both get asked a lot, which is, so how are you doing now, right? And the shortcomings of a reentry. But Ken, who, by the way, Ken Nixon is joining us from Africa. So he's probably getting a little sleepy, but I don't think he dozed off during Lacino. But before he dozes off during me, Ken, what would you like to add to that conversation about accountability?
I think he's absolutely correct. And we've got to find a way to level the playing field. It's one-sided. It is absolutely controlled by one side. And it's a little, in my mind, it's a little more beyond just power. Yes, the prosecutor has all the power. They also have all the control. The defense only gets the information that the prosecutor. That's control. You're literally controlling the narrative of what happens with the case, because you're only given the information that you want them to have. How often do we see that, you know, the prosecutor withheld information from the defense, sent somebody to prison? They're controlling the narrative of what happens. Even in the way the court process plays out, closing arguments, the prosecutor gets the last words. You know, they get the first words and they get the last words. They're controlling the narrative of what's happening. They're dictating how the outcome is supposed to look, which is why the conviction rate is so high, because the prosecutor controls the whole entire case from beginning to end, from the start of the investigation to verdict. They're controlling. They're controlling what gets said, what gets out, what happens during sentencing. They're controlling the entire outcome. We have to find a way to level the playing field. When it comes to accountability for me, I don't know what the answer is for everybody, but Lacino said some things that I stand behind 100%. I don't know what accountability looks like as a system-wide change. However, for me personally, my prosecutor himself has been involved in a minimum of 3 wrongful convictions that I know of, but yet he still has a job. He'll still retire with his pension. What accountability looks like for me, I wish I could have a conversation. And I don't want to have an angry, aggressive, mean conversation. I just want him to look me in my face and explain to me why he caused me such a significant injury. Why was it necessary to force that upon me? I didn't ask for that. I did nothing to you to receive that. Why was that necessary? What was the point of that? Beyond trying to further your career, why did you make it a point to ruin my life? I did nothing deserving of that. So do I think he should go to prison? Absolutely not. But I can tell you that I don't think he should ever hold that much power ever again in his life. I think that he should be stripped of that power, and he should never, ever be able to hold that much power over what anybody else's destiny. I think, you know, law shouldn't be his profession. I think he should be at a shoe store somewhere or some other profession where he has no say-so in what happens in people's lives. Accountability is a major thing, even with the police. You know, they protect each other. They don't hold each other accountable, as we all know. And, you know, for me, I have an issue with that because I've said this to police officers. I've said this to police chiefs. When you take an oath, even as a lawyer, you take an oath. And for police officers, that oath is to protect everybody, not just some people. You don't get to dictate who the law applies to. And that means if the guy standing next to you in a uniform is committed to crime, he should be held accountable just like the guy standing next to you that's not in the uniform. I have a big issue with the way that the law is administered because it allows for human error. That's not fair. It creates an unfairness. Accountability should be even across the playing field. If I did something wrong, you're going to hold me accountable for it. It should be the same on the other side. And again, I'm a firm believer in a mistake and intention. If Something was done by mistake, we can accept that. But a perfect example is the prosecutor in my case. One wrongful conviction might have been a mistake, but there's no way you're going to justify 3 of them. You can't that you didn't know what was going on the next 2 times you did it. It's impossible for you to make anybody believe that. So accountability for me, I feel like I personally just would like to have a conversation. I would want to look them in the face and just ask why. Why was it necessary? Why did you have to do that? Why did you feel like you absolutely had to finish that case off conviction?
Thanks, Ken. I'm wondering, because a lot of our audience are law students and lawyers, but certainly we know there's a group of law students in the audience. I'm wondering if we could shift gears just a little bit, and I'm going to have Ken start this time, Lacino. I want to kind of focus on, there's lots of things, lots of tips that you could give these law students, but I'd like you to focus on this idea of someone who's an aspiring prosecutor, right? And going in, personally, I can say that I have seen some cultural changes, and I think a lot of it has to do, frankly, with the 2 of you in this room. Well, one of you sort of virtually in this room, because, kind of going back to the Cooley Innocence Project history, we've only been around for 20 years, which seems like a really long time to me, but it's really a short time in history. And what I've really noticed as a teacher and as a lawyer is that, young lawyers or young aspiring lawyers want to be good public servants. But it can be challenging if you go into a cultural environment, which I have definitely seen over the years as a defense attorney and an Innocence Project lawyer, where people are literally keeping score. So going back to Lacino's point, when I was a young public defender, I would work with prosecutors' offices that literally kept a chart of wins and losses. And to me, that was very shocking in an environment that I thought was about achieving justice. It shouldn't matter in the prosecutor's office how many cases you win or lose. It should be, are they getting, are the defendant's constitutional rights protected, and are we getting to the right result? So I'm wondering, Ken, if you could give some tips to those who are aspiring lawyers or young lawyers about how they can be part of a cultural change in the criminal justice system.
My answer to that question would be humanize every case, because at the end of the day, this isn't just a stack of papers. I'm not just a case file. I'm not just a set of numbers that are being emailed back and forth between people. I'm not. There's a human attached to every decision you make. Humanize every single case that you have. My other suggestion would be, don't be afraid to stand up. The reason we're seeing cultural change all over this country is because brave people are standing up. There was no such thing as a conviction integrity unit 20 years ago. There was no such thing as, this many innocence projects all over the country. There was no such thing as progressive-minded prosecutors all over the country. This is a new wave because people are brave. People are willing to accept whatever comes their way. When you see the change that's happening right now, it's because of brave people willing to take those lashes. I'm willing to take whatever beating comes with being the person that's going against the grain. It's really hard to stand against a machine. And that's what a lot of people in this country have begun to see, because the system, it's affecting more people than anybody could imagine. There used to be a time where certain people and certain things were off limits, right? Celebrities were off limits. Famous people were off limits. Rich people were off limits. Kids were off limits. Women were off limits. Now, the women's prison is exploding at the state. They're attacking all over the which way. Rich people are going to prison. It's affecting everybody now. The power and authority has just gone to a place where it hasn't been before, and society's tired of it. So my suggestion would be, don't be afraid. If you see something wrong, question it. When there's a piece of paper that doesn't have an answer or it causes you to have a question that you don't see an answer to, question it. There's nothing wrong with being the outspoken person. There's nothing wrong with being the person when you know you're right. I've been taught this since I was a kid. My mom tells me to this day, when you know you're right, you stand on it. And it doesn't make a difference who. It took me 15 years to convince somebody that I was innocent. I knew I was right and I stood on it. Stand on it. Sometimes you are the person that's right, and it just took for you to be the person to stand up.
Thanks for that. Lacino, tips for up-and-coming law students and young lawyers to help make cultural change in the criminal justice system.
I know one of the things that left an impact on me is I was introduced to the concept of restorative justice by the University of Michigan Dearborn. I took an Inside Out program, and I was really surprised that it took me so long to be introduced to this concept, because I'm like actively, searching out this sort of information, and it took me a long time to come across that. And I came across this book, the Restorative Justice Handbook, and in it, barely page 409-410 to be exact, but in it, one of the things they discussed in there is like kind of like the history of the police, the history of the community, right? And a lot of things we think is natural, right? We think that it's natural. I tell people this. There was a young man killed in 1955, his famous Emmett Till. He was killed in Money, Mississippi in 1955 by the sheriffs. And I tell people all the time that in 1955, black people didn't call the police. Not in Money, Mississippi, they didn't. Because in Money, Mississippi, the police was the Ku Klux Klan. And black people wasn't calling the Ku Klux Klan to solve their problem. I usually tell people that to say that when people have problems, and in that particular incident, people didn't just call the police to solve their problems. There were ways to solve problems, rape, murder, theft, whatever they was. In 1955, black people was not calling the sheriff. And there was a lot of cities like that, a lot of places around the country where when there was some sort of harm community in the community, some sort of loss or theft or damage, the community had ways to deal with the problems that didn't require the state coming in and separating community members or family members. So one of the things I would say to students is that we need to have an understanding more about our criminal justice system, how it came to be the way that it is today, as opposed to thinking that what we have now is natural and the best. What we have now was created over a course of time. Even the way that we know with so-called mass incarceration, we can sit back and somewhat pinpoint a time and era where courts began to sentence people at a rate that they weren't sentenced to before, and where the prison population began to grow. Meaning that things can be traced. We need to have a better understanding of how our system began where it is now, as opposed to our starting point being, this is the system we have, and how do we make it better? This is the system we have, how do we work within it? We should have, I think most people wouldn't even understand how little police courts and prisons, what little they even played in our lives. You know, how just the family, the community, and the people around you solve problems. And so that would be one of the bigger things I think as you're being a student, have a better understanding of our system. I tell people this all the time. Go back and read Federalist Paper number 10. When the founding fathers were arguing what type of country what type of government, what type of system was going to be set up, way back in the 1700s, and I want to say it was Alexander, he said there would come a time in this country where this 400 years ago, where majority of the people in this country would be poor. And they did not want a system where the majority could vote the rights away of the minority. meaning the poor could vote the rights away of the rich. So when this system was being set up, there were certain safe gaps and things put in there where, I say that to say this, most of us just don't have an understanding of our society. We don't have an understanding of the system that we say is the best system in the world. And we have very little understanding of other systems. So a lot of times when we say that America is the best system of the world, we compare it to what? We're comparing it based upon our information and knowledge of what? Because we studied other systems. We know how other systems work. So that would be my biggest advice, that we have to have a better understanding of how we got to where we are now. It's hard to fix something if there's no diagnostics. You know what I'm saying? If there's nothing done to understand, how did we get here? And a lot of times we just start where we're at and we try to move forward. I say that. Black, and I continue to say that. Black people didn't call the police in a lot of those southern states. But it wasn't murder. It wasn't these rapid murders in these communities. It wasn't people living in fear in these communities. These communities have ways to solve problems. And we've gotten away from that. We've gotten in a way to where now it's acceptable for the state to come in and determine what to do with my child. That's unacceptable to me, that the state can just come in and tell me what's going to happen with my property. We've allowed the state to encroach. And I know I'm taking these conversations a little further, but I believe that's where the conversations should really be at.
And that's why we invited you.
Yes, we should deal with some of these individual things that officers are doing, but they're being done in these larger systems, in these much larger culture. You know, which is why I said this competitiveness. We cannot compete for the most basic things. Justice is a basic thing that everybody should have an expectation to receive. You should not have to compete for it. And as long as you're competing for it, the cheating is built in. It doesn't make you a bad person. And even with the cheating, I told somebody the other day, some woman told me that she doesn't lie. And I told her, I said, it might become a time when you need to lie. And we had this long, drawn-out conversation. I think about how, so for an example, homeless people, they're not necessarily bad people, but in order to maneuver through the society, some people lie about all sort of insignificant things that don't matter, but it's important for them to be able to stand somewhere for a certain time, to get some sort of shelter. You know, I say that to say that we never know what we may have to do in this system, and it doesn't make you a bad person necessarily. Some people get put in a, I say, if you were homeless, I bet lying I bet you wouldn't have the same sort of opinion you have on lying. Because I deal with homeless people every day, and I look at just, once again, this is a group with no power in our society. And I see how life is such more difficult. I can see I could be standing somewhere and somebody perceived to be homeless standing somewhere in totally different treatment. I have homeless people who come to my house and they drop their bags off every day. Because, you know, when you're homeless, you might carry 4 bags or 3 bags. And the minute people see those bags, you automatically getting treated different. So in some sense, it's deceptive. It might not seem like that, but for them to come drop their bags and stuff off so they can maneuver as a normal person. They're not maneuvering through the day-to-day life as a homeless, because as soon as you put those bags on, you homeless now. So I just say that to say that we never know. People get put in situations. It doesn't make you necessarily a horrible person that doesn't deserve, you know. And I would think about a justice system. And I know I'm a little late, but I really want to think about a justice system where we can say a 15 or 14-year-old has no value ever again in life. 30, 40, it's a man named James Thomas. He's been out here doing all sorts of things. I mean, that should be applauded. But he was incarcerated when he was 15. And if it wasn't for the juvenile life law, he would still be incarcerated. So, I mean, I just think we just need to take a look. I think a lot of these things that we look at, we need to start looking a lot more structural. I know we want to have these immediate impacts. Like, they got an immediate impact on me. I'm out. So I know if people were thinking just structural and they weren't thinking Lacino Hamilton, they weren't thinking particular in these individual things, then, so I know they go hand in hand, but that structural part has to be a part of the it has to be a major part of the conversation. You know, how our system is designed, from what neighborhoods receive. I tell people all the time, so, for an example, you can heavily patrol some of the worst neighborhoods, right? That's a choice. Or you can allow the big pharmaceutical companies to sell pharmaceutical grade heroin throughout our country. And you can allow the big pharmaceutical companies to create an opium epidemic that leads to a resurgence of heroin. It's all legal. It's all legal, but it's really no different than what the guys on the corner are doing. No, they have the blessing of the state to sell pharmaceutical grade heroin, and the guys on the corner may not have the blessing of the state to sell this. I just say that a lot of it is just choices. Like I said, it's choice who we want to put our attention on.
So I'm wondering if it's possible that we can open it up to questions from the audience, because we're quickly running out of time, and I have a few more questions that I can always pose. You know, I can see, for those of you who are on camera, I'm seeing you very engaged, and so if you have questions, do they put them in the chat? And we'll try to get them posed, or if all right. Well, then before we wrap up, I do have one more question. You guys were like great interviewees, because I was trying to take some notes and I would think of a buzzword. Lacino and I, one of the things that we have in common is we love words and we love language. And so what I was doing is I was writing down words, right? And I wrote down the word very early on in this conversation, restorative justice. And then we talked about some other things, but Ken, I'm gonna ask you whether you read I'm not gonna ask you, Ken, whether you read the Restorative Justice Handbook, because I am remiss to say I have not, but I am picking it up tonight, Lacino, and I'm reading it, and I want to have a conversation with you about that. But Ken, from a restorative justice perspective, I really felt like when you said earlier, I want to sit down with the prosecutor and ask him why he made the choices that he did. Some people's reaction to that might be, well, that's kind of like confrontational, or that isn't going to go anywhere. But that is having a conversation with the person who has harmed you is a big piece of restorative justice. So Ken, I want to just have you comment on restorative justice, or ask you if you want to say anything more about what you talked about earlier.
So to answer your first question, no, I have not read the handbook. I have not, but with the concept.
You're going to have a long plane ride home, Ken, so you need to read that by the time you arrive back in Michigan.
That's a nice book.
All right. Will do, Marla. I am with the concept. I think restorative, you are correct. What I said is a part of restorative justice, and it may seem a bit confrontational to some people. However, for me, the criminal justice system is so impersonal when it comes to prosecution and defense, right? Because the prosecutor never actually talks to the defendant. I've never heard of, not very many people, defendants that I've had the pleasure of being around, can say that they've actually had a conversation with the prosecutor. You were a case file to that person. So my personal thing would be I want to put a face with it. right? I don't want to be the guy on TV that you say, oops, I screwed that case up. I want you to look me in my face and explain to me, answer my questions, right? So many other people around that person could have tons of questions. Why? What happened? Where did it go wrong? What can we change? But I want you to answer my questions directly and not be able to look away, or, you know, me just be a case file or just another person on the news challenging whatever it was you were doing. I want you to explain to me why it was important for you to do that, right? Tell me to my face why my kids suffered that, why my family suffered that. Why was it necessary to take that course of action? So absolutely, I think restorative justice could change a lot, because it forces that person to confront the harm that they've caused. And whether it's necessary or unnecessarily, if we were able to change the mindset of one person or one prosecutor, that's how we chip away at the culture. Because sometimes they may not realize what they did caused that much harm until I explain to you that I missed those birthdays, or I missed those Christmases, or I was the guy on the phone with my kids screaming when that 15 minutes ran out, or I was the guy that spent an hour doing homework on the phone with my kid. You know, that's a totally different conversation than just a case file or passing along notes to the next person. That's a totally different conversation. So I think restorative justice can play a key role in chipping away at the culture of what we deal with right now.
In Lacino, we only have a few minutes, and I have a couple of announcements at the end. So can you give us your tidbit on that?
Yeah, I think as well it's a move in the right direction. Understanding the concept that restorative justice is that people have been harmed or damaged, and the ultimate goal is how do you repair? How do you restore somebody or something to the state that it was, or the best possible that you can? And I think that's a good place to start, is that we're trying to repair or restore as opposed to punish, right? As opposed to the goal is this person needs to be punished. You know, I think that just starting out from that concept is that we're starting out saying that we're going to do something that we're not going to harm somebody or hurt somebody. You know, and I don't think that that should be a concept of how you get justice. Justice meaning how do you make something whole again? How do you know, I don't think that starting out with punishing somebody is the way. I think that starting from a restorative mind frame, that the goal is to make this situation as best or as whole as we possibly can. And I just think that as you said, that's a good place to start. Restorative justice is a good place to start. Transformative justice is the place we're trying to go.
Thank you for that. You know, I know, again, there's some Innocence Project folks out there, and I would highly recommend, if you want to read about restorative justice in the specific context, I would really recommend that you read a book called Picking Cotton. We don't have time to talk about it, but it's an example of where the victim and the wrongfully convicted man, through restorative justice, you know, literally to this day are still making the world a better place. So I'll throw that out. I also want to just remind everybody that while we're celebrating Wrongful Conviction Day, the theme was the fight continues. So if you didn't notice the pink boxing gloves next to Lacino, I'm really into that much more than Lacino. But you know, we'd really love to, you know, the fight continues, and ending on this note of restorative justice, I think, is really powerful. So I thank you, Lacino, and you, Ken, from the other side of the world, for being here today. And I would just like to remind everybody that this is technically 2020 was the project's 20th anniversary. Roughly, I would say May of 2021 was when we started our clinic. And we're going to be celebrating that quite grandly in the spring. So please keep an eye out for that. And finally, keep an eye out for future community conversations that are hosted by Cooley Law School. Thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. And I'm sure that you got a lot out of it. And I think this was very thought-provoking, and certainly is sending me into the end of October where we celebrated Wrongful Conviction Day, rethinking my approaches as well. So thank you both so much, and thank you for all attending.